Hello and welcome to part 2 of the GeekVerse Sidequest Game of the Year celebration. In this episode, we are going to decide on the 5 best levels in video games of 2022. I'm your host and podcaster Dylan Muss, and I have with me, as always, Dante. How are you feeling on this Saturday afternoon here? A little bit different vibe for us on the recording time.
Yeah, not that late night after work move. I'm feeling great, well slept, ready to discuss some killer levels that we both played this year, maybe that we both didn't play.
Yeah.
There's some that I know you will probably talk about in waves that I didn't even get to touch. So excited to hear about those.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this. I'm always raving about level design and stuff on the reviews. So this is one of my favorite of the best of categories. The other ones we have in our first episode of the Game of Year stuff, we did best visuals and best music. That was a lot of fun. And then the episode after this will be best characters. So that'll be great. And then we're closing off the finale is, of course, the top 10 lists. Also for the SideQuest feed fans, of course, the Game Awards was just a couple days ago. We covered that on the main GeekVerse feed, talked about that for a good while, talking about the announcements, the winners, all that good stuff. So a lot of fun stuff over there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you to Amanda for doing the music, Taylor for the thumbnails as usual. And I just want to get right into it today. I'm very excited for this. So let's do it.
Go.
I'm going to kick it off here. So, okay, best levels. What does that mean? It could be a bit of a nebulous term. Some games it's very obvious. It's like, okay, 4-3 is a level, like a Mario structure. Other games it's not as obvious. So I have a lot of open world things on my list, but I'm kind of being specific. I'm talking about a certain town or a specific area. And yeah, other games, it might be a little more nebulous. We're going to try and be specific. We might not always be specific, but we'll try our best. And we are going to rifle off nominations, as many as we can possibly come up with. And then we are going to narrow it down to a top 5, the 5 best levels of the year. Very quick, our list from last year is Updom from Deathloop, Magnificus's Game from Inscription, The Stranger, Outer Wilds, Mendoza from Hitman 3, and House Beneviento from Resident Evil Village, which is a damn good list. An arcade game and Hitman, that's hard to compete with. I don't know if I mean, one of those games might be popping up again this year. I'll just say that.
Oh,
that's a good list. So
sneaking some last year in here. I see you.
Hey, it's new content this year. I'm going to start by throwing out Sniper Elite 5. We've mentioned this a little bit in passing, but Sniper Elite 5, this was such a surprise for me this year, and once again, grateful to Game Pass because I don't know if I would have checked it out without it, but when this game came out, I was hearing people describe it as kind of like a Hitman adjacent thing. I'm like, what? That's completely my vibe. Let me check this out. And I just loved this game from start to finish. I was hooked on it. It very much is Hitman adjacent in that the maps are much bigger, and I think they're maybe less flashy than a Hitman thing. They're more consistent in their setting of like World War II kind of vibe. And it's more about combat than stealth, but there is still stealth in it. But for me, it's like the levels are beautiful. There is so many layers to them, different ways you can go about these things. It is just some of the best level design. So literally on my list, I wrote every single map from this game because they are all fantastic. But I think I'm just going to highlight 2 here, and those can be the ones in conversation. So the first one is a level called Spy Academy. And this level... It kind of starts out where you are kind of walk down from the hills, and then you see this massive, it's almost like a university, just like this tower that's in the distance, and then this very long bridge that leads up to it. And that's like the first challenge of the level, is just getting across that bridge, because obviously it's very open. You can kind of cruise around in the sand below, or you can walk along the bridge itself, but it's almost impossible to do that without getting spotted by the numerous enemies, and that's a very fun challenge. And then just going up this winding, spirally road, and all sorts of buildings, interiors, exteriors, as you climb up this just like seemingly endless tower to get to the top of this thing where your target is. Just amazing stuff, like visually stunning level, really, really cool level design. It's a massive, sprawling. So shout outs to Spy Academy. And then the other mission I want to shout out is called Wolf Mountain. And this one also has a lot of build up to it, where you're cruising through these different roads and different little bases and stuff. But then you eventually get to Hitler's house, and he has like this big house with like a vineyard. And of course, he just has like all these different buildings where he goes to do whatever activity he wants to do. And this feels much more of a Hitman thing, where it's like they set up all these opportunities for you to kill him in creative and hilarious ways, as you'd normally do in Sniper Elite. but since your target is Hitler, it just makes it better because there's just no guilt. It's like, yeah, I'm just gonna fuck up Hitler in all these different ways. So it's a beautiful level, really complex, a lot of variety to it as well. So those are going to be my 2 Sniper Elite 5 nominations. But once again, every level in that game is like top 5 contender of the year. Like so good. And I've added all of them to my wish list. I'm gonna go pick up all the old ones and go through them now because like this game just got me hooked instantly on this series. I wish it didn't have such a generic name and generic art because I think it would have spoken out to me sooner. I'd always saw it in Steam sales and just pass it by. I'm like, oh, it looks generic. I don't care about that. But it's like, no, these games are super cool. So there you go. A couple nominations from Sniper Elite 5.
Wax poetic, why don't you? I seriously need to pick one of these up. It sounds like I've been hearing people be pretty positive on the Sniper Elite series for a long time, and I was always just like, maybe not so much my bag, but it sounds like it would be right up my alley actually. All right, so I'm going to go a very different direction. So I wanted to shout out Dreadstone Peak, which is from Salt and Sacrifice. That is a so in Salt and Sacrifice, there are these like big 2D, very large levels, kind of like Metroidvania-esque. But in the process, you're hunting down almost like a monster hunter. You're hunting down a big, like large scale boss, which are called mages. Dreadstone Peak is just my favorite level to do these hunts in. There it is. The outside is this like sprawling wintry wonderland that you're like climbing up this mountain, and then there are these tombs throughout this level where you actually have like this inside zone as well that is like almost like old Egyptian kind of like catacombs that are just like gorgeously ornate, and there's like it's really beautiful. So you end up having
like quite the contrast between the inside and outside. That's interesting.
Totally, yeah. So it is one of those things when you're doing the fights on the outside, it's like, oh my god, this is like there's tons of like actual contrast there too, because it's just this stark white place, very snowy atmosphere, and then some of the mages will use like these like bright purple attacks or bright reds and stuff like that, and you have this really like stark contrast. And then when you go down into the tombs, it's really dark and dreary, but then you like get these flashes of light and you get to see like the walls, and they have this like beautiful art all over them. The art style in that game is so bizarre to begin with. So anytime that they offer you a little bit of an opportunity to kind of like see them do their strange art style a little bit more, maybe in a different context than just the like enemy design and the typical kind of like level design that they use, which is pretty similar to most Metroidvanias. I feel like this one has like the biggest difference between the zones, and you have to run through both to chase down the enemies. I think it's or chase down the mages. That one just really stood out to me in a game that has about like 6 levels total, each kind of having these like fairly large open areas to go chase around this mage, similar to chasing around a monster in Monster Hunter. But this one had, like I said, the biggest difference between moving from like point A to point B, that you had like a lot of variety in it in just this one little level.
Love it.
Yeah, Salt and Sacrifice, a very cool game that came out this year that I heard no one talk about as well.
I was about to say that. Yeah, I feel like the conversation on that has been absolute zero, so I'm glad that you're able to honor it a bit here.
I loved it. So I will wax poetic about it more later for sure.
Good stuff. Let's cruise over to one of the many open world games this year, one that we are both a big fan of, Elden Ring. So there's many ways you could go about clarifying what a level is in this game. Yeah. So how about because I'm sure you have a couple from this game too. Totally. Let's just kind of throw out a bunch, and then maybe we could leave them all on the list for now. We could narrow it down if we want. But the first one for me is probably the most low-key one, and I think also the most personal, and I mentioned this on the review, but Castle Morn is one of the potentially early castles you'll go to in the game. It's at the very southern peak of Limgrave. That's the name of the area there. But yeah, for me, this was the first real point of friction that I contacted with in the game, and it was just because it was... maybe I was like under-leveled for the situation, but it just felt like that's kind of the first major dungeon I think I went to in the game. I love the castles in this game. I have a couple other castles as well, but just the design of these castles is so much fun. The sprawling design, the verticality of them, and of course that kind of Dark Soul janky platforming element where you're jumping off the sides of buildings and landing on weird ledges. Castlemorn has all sorts of that. I like the story element of it, that from a distance you're kind of climbing, you're kind of going down this valley, and then you're at the bottom of the castle climbing up, and then the conclusion of this dungeon is to go all the way down below where you even started, way down to the sands below on the very coast, and just isolated in the corner, locked behind this gate, is the boss there, Leonine Misbegotten, which is a very difficult boss fight for me because I went there pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I love that idea that the boss is like tucked away and imprisoned, like out on this almost island, way below the castle proper. So shout outs to Castle Morn. Really like this location.
Another one of the better moments in like going through this very difficult thing and then getting something super cool at the end as well. Like just this sick reward of that like ridiculous sword that's also like it got 3,000 swords built into it. Yeah, just nice little cherry on top. I'm gonna shout out another castle. I loved Castle Redmane. That is where the Radon Festival is happening. So that kind of ends in a very insane boss fight. But even leading up to it, I think that area is really cool because you're working your way through Caelid, which is a horrific experience, especially if you get teleported there early. You're just like, oh god, what is happening? It is just this realm of death, it feels like. But then as you get to the kind of, I guess it's the southern edge, southeastern edge as well, you see this like long bridge, and then it's just this huge castle. And there's the reason that I loved Castle Redmane is there's two ways to move through Castle Redmane. You can either follow a quest line that he essentially extends the invitation to the Radon Festival, and you get to just move through this very empty castle. And it's one of the few places in the game where there's like 0 enemies, and you kind of just get to enjoy the space and walk through it and then get to the festival. And then there's this like one of also very few large story moments where it's like you and a bunch of NPCs all gathering around, and they offer you this like kind of invitation to kill their king because he has just been unkillable for centuries, it seems like. But then there's the other way where you can kind of just stumble upon Castle Redmane, and it is a really tough kind of section of the game where you have to like move through with all of these soldiers, and there is a boss fight that is particularly very difficult because it's a replication of the boss fight you just mentioned, alongside one of the I forget their names, but
Crucible Knight, right?
Crucible Knights. They're like those really like those red ornate enemies that do that. Like
those guys fucked me up too. So when I got to that fight took me so many tries. Oh my god!
I'm sure if you were like, man, this was a tough boss fight, and then you see him again, and he's got a homie next to him, you're like, why are you doing this to me? So definitely what seemed like a very difficult boss fight for most. My first playthrough, I didn't even see that boss fight, which is pretty crazy. So just a really cool level in Elden Ring because it offers that kind of those two wholly different experiences depending on how you approach it.
Yeah. I think we talked about that on our review because we were talking about Redmane Castle, and we were both just describing our experience, but then we realized that we're talking about different things, and we're like, oh wait, is there just like this kind of non-linearity to the way you can experience? Because I didn't go back and fight Radon for maybe another 20-30 hours after I had cleared Redmane Castle, so that's a fun. And I think because you can even you can get teleported either inside of it or near it, right? Or you can like cross the bridge, right? So there's even different ways that you can physically get there, or maybe the teleporter takes you to like right where the bridge is or something like that. I forget exactly what it is.
Teleporters on either side of the bridge, and I think the teleporter only activates if you've finished the side quest. So one, you just walk through the bridge and it's just like enemies, and then the teleporter almost brings you to a different instance right in the beginning of the realm as well, but there's no enemies there.
Right. Let's keep it on the castle train of things. We got to mention Stormvale Castle, which is it's almost, this one feels almost too big to call a level. This is the size of many games jammed within this one
Yeah,
area.
right.
Just this massive dungeon that takes hours and hours, has I think multiple boss fights, and I think too this one has. I think one of the reasons this one stands out to me is not only just the great level design, once again, that verticality, the fact that it's just the city inside of this thing, all the different enemy types, the different pathways, the shortcuts, all the different checkpoints. I forget the name of the checkpoints in Elden Ring that you can get to. But just the reward of course, killing that boss and getting the soul, whatever it is from. I'm forgetting all the terms from Elden Ring. It's been so long now.
It's been a year. There's DLC to hop back into. Maybe we just gotta make
true.
a refresher.
But even when you beat him and you get through Stormvale Castle, that like opens up the next big open world area of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big reward too, and getting down to the Lake of Liurnia. So yeah, Stormvale 2, also just the menacing nature of it, because you see it for so many hours, and you could go there right away, but I know I didn't. I know I was like, I'm not ready for that yet. I haven't been there yet, but I can tell you I am not ready for it. And yeah, so it's just endless layers with the Stormvale Castle.
And speaking of that reward, this is getting into a very big zone. So this is once again the kind of like nebulous, is this a level or is this a whole open world? But I'm going to shout out Liurnia as maybe one of the best zones in Elden Ring. Like the fact that you spend all of this time in this very like medieval kind of like fantasy area, and then out of nowhere you get through this castle, and it's just this beautiful magical realm full of all of these like lakes and giant lobsters that are terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And with this beautiful like magic castle in the middle, but then there's also like in the top left there's this like big strange wall, and you walk up and you hit the wall and it opens up another entirely new zone. There's so much packed into this space that feels much more like there's more like magistry throughout this zone that you didn't experience in Limgrave, which just felt like still very incredible to explore, but felt like this very traditional medieval space. And then that's the first time you open up that kind of threshold to being like, okay, there is a lot of magic in this realm. There are lots of different types of magic in this realm that you kind of get to experience all at once. So you get to experience kind of like some spacey style magic. You get to experience some of the frenzy stuff there. You get to experience people using like the crystal magic there. Like there's just it kind of opens up the world at that point, which you get to experience more and more of in independent zones as you go forward. But it is really one of those spaces that give you so much more variety than the previous zone that it kind of feels like that's the one that made me feel like the sky's the limit in this game. Like you realize that there's another 2, 3, maybe 4 whole zones after this that are going to give you a hopefully a similar experience that like it just kind of made my it made me think about what the potential of this game was in a way that maybe the first zone didn't.
That's a good point, because I feel like one of the surprising things about Elden Ring, and maybe I should have said this up top, I think we're going to get a bit more spoilery in this episode. Obviously, if we're talking about a late game area in a game, then we're going to have to spoil it somewhat. So best visuals, music, we can be pretty light on the spoilers. Here we're going to be a bit more spoilery. One of the surprising parts about Elden Ring is the fact that the map and even the scale of the map starts quite small and centered on your area, but then when you get to a new area, the map just expands, and it's very unclear when that is finished, and that subversion happens like at least 6 times, I want to say, where it keeps going. But I feel like Lake of Liurnia is probably maybe the first time that happens. I guess Caelid might do it if you went over there. I can't remember, but that's definitely a time where it's like, oh, vertically this map goes up more, and then that's not even close to how vertically it does go. So that's a good subversion too. I had on my list the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Are you kind of bundling that in with this, or would that be a separate area? Because that is much more of a, I'll say almost linear, actually, for how non-linear Elden Ring is, more of a linear level. And it is quite separate from the rest of the world, right? Like you can't go at it from all these different angles. It has a specific start and end point. I mean, I'm sure that's wrong. I'm sure there's shortcuts and different ways and teleportations, all these things, but it at least feels like more of a 3-4 in terms of level structure.
Yeah, I feel like that is the dungeon within that open world. It's or that open area. Right. It's kind of hard because it is within it. right? But ultimately it feels like its own piece, the same way that like Stormvale feels like its own piece of Limgrave, right? So I think you can shout out both.
Sounds good. Do you have more Elden Ring stuff to shout out here? I have
Yes.
2 more. Keep going. What's
Yeah.
next?
I wanted to shout out the city of Landell. I think that is one of my favorite kind of cities in a FromSoft game. Maybe I don't know. The main big city in Sekiro is also very cool to explore. But Landell has this just like gorgeous architecture throughout, and it actually has like a full-on city that looks like it was genuinely once lived in, which is not typical for a FromSoft game. I don't think. Like I don't feel like I've obviously it doesn't feel lived in still because everybody's like half dead and zombie like or just kind of barely defending the place. But it is one of the few spaces that I'm like I can really imagine people living here. It has a really once again another level in Elden Ring that I think the variety is really cool within. So like the bottom most portions of that are all covered in sand. And like it's almost like some of the houses are like half packed in with sand, and you kind of wonder. That game in general makes you wonder like what things were like when it was sprawling. Like how did we get to this point? The gigantic, beautiful tree in the middle that's like glowing bright yellow or bright gold. And then as you make your way up, it's like, okay, here's the maybe upper class level of this city. And then you go up even higher and you're actually like crawling on parts of the tree to get to that, to like the top section of it, where this is probably where you would imagine like your royalty living. And the fact that they have like built this city almost into the tree is just absolutely gorgeous. I one of my favorite cities in a FromSoft game ever. I thought it was very, very cool and just gorgeous to be in.
I forget what the event is. Maybe it's the cauldron when like that gets recontextualized too, where that area changes. Yeah, I think for me, the Lionel is just like the scale of it truly feels like an actual city, where in open world games usually things are much lower scale. And this is not a lively city, so it's not like the NPCs and like that element is to scale. But just in terms of like how many individual streets they added, that almost feel like there isn't really any design going on there. Like they aren't specific parts that you're supposed to have this cool experience with, but they're just there for flavor in a way. But then you actually can just go on all the rooftops and go through all the streets if you want to. And I'm sure there's all sorts of hidden goodies in there that I didn't bother going through. But yeah, that's another huge area. I put Volcano Manor on my list. I don't know if I want to fight for it, but I think my last one that I do want to fight for is Sofria River. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know if I've...
I have Siofra, yeah, Siofra, and I combined Ansel River with that one on my list because they are
kind of like the greater under
the same coin, right? Like, you go to Siofra first though. It's the first time you really get that experience. So,
I guess you might. I mean, once again, that could be like you might not though. You might go through the other tunnel, I guess, to get there first. I mean, I think most people, including me as well, did go through Sofri first. But yeah, that just mind-blowing moment of going down that lift.
The elevator, man.
Going down that lift. Going down that lift. Going down. It never fucking ends. And then just the trippiness of it with the sky. It's a mind-blowing moment for sure. And I think it does a good job of hinting at places you're going to go to much later, when you do the Radon thing and you can go through and get to those upper areas, and then seeing what is like Mog's area. I forget the name of that zone, but you can of course see that up in the distance, and you're wondering like, when am I going to get there? And for me, it was many dozens of hours later before I actually got to that location. So yeah, it's just the ending sprawling nature of this. I also felt like this was both a place full of wonder and mystery, but it was also incredibly hostile. The enemy types there, the archers were very savage. I like the kind of mini game you're doing down there of like activating the different torches to get the boss fight and stuff. So yeah, this is definitely a standout area for me.
And while an easy boss, the first time you get to see that boss, you're just like, oh my god, it's beautiful. That man, we didn't talk about that fight with best music. That is one of my favorite songs.
With the ancestor spirit, is that what it's called?
Yeah, I love the music in that world. One of those few times where you're fighting a boss and I'm like, I'm just gonna stand here for a little bit, or like just dodge for a while so this is end quick.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so I would Volcano Manor be worth going on the list here? I don't know if I'm gonna fight for it, but
not in the same way. I
okay.
do really like the when you go further down into Volcano Manor. I think that is like
Mm-hmm.
really cool. That area does change pretty incredibly, but it does also feel like, okay, here's a fiery zone in a FromSoft game, which I feel
Sure.
like I've seen a few of those before.
Well, actually, that's a point I wanted to mention for Lake of Irony, where I feel like when I first saw that, I was almost a bit worried. I'm like, okay, I've been here before from Soft, but then it's not like
It's not that.
what
Yeah.
you expect from their like swampy areas and things like
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah, no
any
poison
other
water there.
any other Elden Ring nominations?
Yes, I got one more.
Okay.
The floating city of Farum Azula.
Okay.
I loved getting teleported there, and you see these big twisters, and you're just in the
Mm-hmm.
sky zone. And I was just like, "Where the hell am I?" I thought that was one of the coolest places you can get teleported to in the game, where it really is one of those spaces that they kind of just hint at, and you try and move through that. Or I got there fairly early.
Yeah.
And I tried to move through that zone thinking I was going to do something in there, and I got my ass handed to me. So one of those cool just like teasing moments in that game where they show you like, once again, hey, this is about to be bigger than you expect it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go there proper, like that kind of like multi-part boss fight you're working through is in fighting the dragon. And if you have done damage to him previously, the final fight with him, when you actually kill him, he has less health, which I thought was really cool.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And then this has the secret moment similar to a lot of other old FromSoft games where you have to do something completely random to get to a boss fight. This one, you go down to these it almost looks like a broken half of a coliseum, and you lay down in one of these spaces, and then you just kind of like, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I hate that shit, man.
I
That's like
know,
FromSoft going too far in the FromSoft isms.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not into that.
It like is one little thing in the course of
Yeah.
a giant game. It's like,
I
all
know,
right,
yeah,
we
yeah.
snuck a little Easter egg in here for you, and it happens to be an entire boss fight, which is
Mm-hmm.
one of the sickest boss fights in that game. This
They love
crazy-
hiding great content. Other
Oh,
games
yeah.
are not so okay with doing that. They're like, I put years of my life into this level. I want the players to experience it. From something,
Yeah.
I don't care. You can,
No.
if you find it, sure. If not, whatever.
Yeah, I love that energy, man. I know it's not for everyone, but I think it's like
Mhm.
just a special treat just for me.
Yeah.
So really think that is an awe-inspiring area. Tons of
Mhm.
I don't know, just it looks different than every other place in that game, and
Yep.
just the skybox in that place is sick.
Definitely. Dante, we are 3 games in. We have 11 nominations on our list. That's just that's just how Levels is gonna go this year.
Yeah,
let's take our first break. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back. This is I'm going to bring this up now. So last year, of course, we had Mendoza from Hitman 3. Hitman 3 had a DLC map come out this year in the summer called Ambrose Island. This is a very, very fun level, kind of a nighttime setting, a bit of a island shanty town mixed with like pirate fortress. This map is great. If I look at it in the scale of the Hitman trilogy, I think it's probably in like my top 8 or 9 somewhere slot in there, which maybe that sounds low, but when you're like when Hitman's like best
levels.
15 maps are better than like 99% of other games levels,
Yeah.
like even being at that point is a major contender. When I compare it to last year, like Mendoza might be like my second or third favorite, so it's not quite on that level. But what's great about this level is a few things. One is there's kind of the pirates, the mercenaries that sort of control this island. But then there's also the kind of military that's there, and there's that dynamic between them, that tension. And you, as the player, obviously can do a lot of things to fuck with that. You can mess up their meeting or destroy this thing, and they'll kind of blame each other and start going at it. So that's a fun dynamic you can play with. This level has 2 targets, and then there's a third objective. I think they've sometimes missed the mark with objectives in the past. Particularly, it's not France. It's one of their first levels where you have to like destroy like a virus or something that's in a basement. And that was a criticism a lot of people had, is that there's like only really one way to do that. So it's like whenever you get to that part of the level, it's like a bit boring or tedious to when you're playing these levels over and over again. But I think they did a good job of remedying that here. You have to nullify a server, so you can obviously just go down and shoot the server. You can go down and hack the server, or you don't even have to go down to the server at all. You can just take out these essentially another third target, and you can get a key card, and then when you get these key cards, you can deactivate the server. So they added a lot of good variety there. Visually, this map is great. It's very silly and fun, as every Hitman level is. So yeah, this is... I feel like Hitman releases a map, it's instantly a best level of the year. That's just like the caliber that they are on. So shoutouts to Ambrose Island.
And Hitman in general, man. They have done something really special with this modern run of the Hitman series. They've absolutely incredible stuff.
It's crazy.
Let's shout out the Monastery in Pentiment. I talked about Pentiment a little bit here previously, and just how much that game surprised the hell out of me. Even the first couple nights I was playing this, I was like, all right, it's like reading a nice storybook. But it's beautiful sometimes. And I think the Monastery is one of the best examples of how gorgeous this game can be. So the Monastery kind of has a few different spots. It has the space where the nuns live, and then it has the monastery itself, which has all of the monks. And just moving through that monastery is truly beautiful. There's a garden, and then there's the cemetery, and it just there's the underground catacombs that have there's
a surprising amount of just doorways and areas in that area.
Yeah, the game has a lot of different locations. Actually, I know in the first act, as you're playing through it, you're I don't know, even going around the cave area, and you're all right, I'm gonna go to these salt caves eventually, and then you get almost through all of Act 2 and you don't go there either. The game's much larger than I expected it to be.
Definitely.
But back to the monastery. One of the reasons that I think the monastery is just such a incredible space is because all of the characters within it are such a have such a different demeanor than everybody else in the town. So you get a completely different energy when you're in the monastery. They're trying to dance around spoilers, but the monastery changes a little bit later in the game.
Can spoil if you want. Go for it, man.
No, I feel like Pentiment is so built around its story, and I feel like it's so new. Just know that the monastery changes a bit, and it has kind of two sides of a coin here, where it really has this gorgeous, ornate structure to it, and then it also has this kind of really dark, dreary, uncomfortable nature to it. So in both of its forms. And the last thing I want to just shout out about the monastery that I think is absolutely one of my favorite places in the entire game is when you're walking through the church. There's this large mural, and it is one of my favorite pieces of art in the entire game. I think it's absolutely stunning, and depending on the choices you make, there become alterations
That's really
of that
cool.
mural.
That's awesome.
That I think is really, really neat. And as you kind of this is a very early game spoiler, you're kind of choosing people that you're blaming for different crimes or murders. And as you make those choices, that mural changes to kind of show these people being burned at the stake or something like that, or being hung or something like that. Really dark stuff gets added to that mural over time that I think is
cool.
Stunning. The Pentiment, a really, really good game that I did not expect to love as much this year. It really snuck up on me, but man, what a killer space.
Amazing. From there, once again, did this last time. I'm going to keep it in the Obsidian camp. We're going to go over to the backyard now in Grounded. So once again, another open world. For me here, I picked the sandbox as the area. Which have you explored the sandbox yet? Okay.
No, I'm excited
to. I won't spoil anything because I don't think I really need to. But for me, this very much is a separate level because there's just the huge walls of the sandbox that block it out from the rest of the world. So it truly does feel like it's a different area. And that's even a huge challenge, is how do you get into the sandbox? And of course, there's multiple ways to do that. I won't say how, but that's a fun challenge in and of itself. But it's one of those things where when I finally got on top of that wall and I could look down, I was like, oh man, what a feast. All this different stuff that I want to go do. There's a hostility here. I'll say this part where the sand is like in daylight is like cooking, right? So it's so hot you can't stand on it. So you kind of have to jump between shadows, which is fun, or you can go out at nighttime. But then, of course, nighttime there's other dangers and it's scary in its own separate way. And then there's all sorts of hidden treasure and different things in this area that I think are very fun. There's an anthill here, so of course there's a huge underground sprawling area as well. Some unique resources, and then I just like this was an area that took me a long time to clear out and get, I'll say 100% completion on. I feel like there's still a couple more hidden things, but
Nice.
I don't know. I just found like even 10, maybe 15 hours after I've been like working my way through the sandbox, I would find like new zones, hidden areas within it. So it's just this endless thing. And then of course there's the little oasis that they put in the corner where there's a little bit of water so you can drink, and there's some grass that you can get there too. And that's like your little safe haven too. It still doesn't feel that safe because there's still enemies all over the place.
Scaring me,
They
actually.
don't go through the water, but like it's a bit of a safe haven. So yeah, I think the sandbox, if I had to look at grounded in an individual place that feels like one level, the sandbox to me is definitely the standout zone in the game so far.
Nice. I have a couple grounded levels as well.
Yeah.
I really am excited to jump back into that game more. I have to wait for a friend to be available whenever I've been playing it multiplayer 100% with him. So
Do it tonight. I'm down. I'm down to play some grounded.
I will drag him out and we will do this tonight because I now want to experience the dread that's going to come out of that sandbox. I'm thinking about a particular level that sounds like it has a lot of similar restrictions on how you're supposed to move through it, and I had a absolutely frustrating time, but also by the time you get through it, it's so satisfying. So I'm going to shout out the water lab, or the koi pond in general. This was I think one of the first times in the game I was really forced to strategize heavily. I think there's another place that I really like that I'm going to shout out as well, but in that place it's kind of just like, all right, you're moving through what feels fairly naturally and it's pointing you in this direction. You start to realize like kind of the scale. The water lab, it's like, okay, I have to make sure that I can breathe for long enough. You go in down into this water and there's like there's lily pads and there's all of these like water pipes or like air pipes that are going throughout it, and it ends up feeling like I don't know, a Sonic level where you're like down underwater and you have to like pick up air bubbles to stay underwater as long as possible while avoiding all of these spiders, and you're finding all of these things that have fallen in to the water over time, which is pretty great. Like there's just like broken pots and there's like a giant T-Rex that's at the bottom of the lake, which is really cool. And then
sunken chests, of course, that's like,
yeah, right.
In there.
And then obviously there is a couple large kois in there that will absolutely mess your day up, but they're beautiful.
Have you killed one of those yet?
No, but I have gotten some of their scales. I found some of their scales just like around, which is pretty cool. But
I'm wondering if they drop anything other than scales when you actually KO them. I haven't done that either yet.
It seems like the koi scale armor is like pretty boss though.
Yeah,
but
it's pretty high level,
yeah, I have some scales and can't do anything with it because I don't have enough. But the part that's really cool about multiple locations in Grounded, but specifically the pond, is you have to go so deep into the pond to access the lab of that level, which ends up being really like, this is something that I didn't hear a lot of people talk about. The labs remind me a lot of Fallout, or like the kind of like New Vegas or like Outer Worlds dungeons. Like it's very Obsidian in that regard, and finding your way into the lab of the koi pond was like one of the largest feats in that game for me so far, that I thought was like, I don't know, this jump out of your chair exciting moment when you get through the door and you get out of the water and you have like one breath left, you have 1 second of air left, and it is this just like, yeah, this really, really exciting moment for me, that it was kind of one of the first times I felt like I really like climbed a mountain in that game. Really, really thought the water lab was like probably my favorite lab so far, and I'm sure there will be more cool ones, considering that is like, I don't know, maybe the 20% mark. There's another 4 labs left, and I'm sure a ton of in-game stuff. So I'm sure I'm just scratching the surface there, but water lab, very cool.
Yeah, I think it's one that's able to hide surprises too, just because of the nature of it just looks like a pond with a few lily pads
Right.
on it. There's nothing to it. But then of course when you're digging around, that's when you're gonna find all the goodies at the bottom. So I like that part of it too. Where the rest of the game, it's like if you can get on a high rock early on in the game, you can pretty much see the scale. You can see like the whole map, which is not
Mhm.
common for an open world. But of course, you can't see the finite details. That's especially true for the pond, where all the good stuff's hiding down below.
Definitely. And then I had another grounded one. If you don't have another one.
Bring it on.
So I also wanted to shout out the first lab that you go to, which is the hedge.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the hedge is just a really good moment where they to really push you to understand the scale in that game. So like you go towards this what looked like huge forest of trees, and you're working your way up the roots, and you get really really high up, and there's these broken parts of this laboratory strewn throughout it, and there's zip lines to go through the different pieces of the laboratory, and it's just this really just cool moment where you feel like you're so high up, and it's this like larger than life space. And then halfway through, I'm realizing they called it the hedge multiple times, and I just realized you're just in a bush.
Yeah.
And it is such a was such a hilarious moment to me to feel like I was in this gigantic forest, and then you are just so small in that game. You're so small in that game that just a bush feels like a rainforest or something. It's like they feel like gigantic trees are moving through. One of your first serious labs you work through, so it is another one where it feels scary, and there is it's the first time it really introduced that like kind of Fallout experience in that game for me, where you're like moving through the zone and everything's kind of a threat, and there's lots of spiders in there, which is super terrifying. Shout out to the spider slider on that game, where you can turn them into just blobs. A really really cool little thing that they added in there for people with arachnophobia. But yeah, just I thought the hedge was really really cool, and a really great opportunity to kind of show you how big this world truly feels, and how small you are in it.
Yeah, I like the level design element of the lab, specifically what you mentioned, that like parts of it have fallen out. Because you're specifically trying to find like a few codes to do some stuff in there. But since the thing is broken all apart, and then you're kind of using the branches to slide between them, I think is a good surprise. And once again, it's one of those ones where on the ground you can just like look up and see all of it, but obviously going through it all is going to be a different challenge. So I'm glad you shouted that one out. I was thinking about bringing that one up as well. I do love the hedge.
Yeah,
great area. I had brought up Grounded, so why don't you bring up the next game that we're going to talk about here?
I wanted to shout out the space station in Citizen Sleeper. I think that is a really cool environment. So it is essentially like this big circular space station, or somewhat circular space station, which ends up being kind of like most of the encompassing parts of that game. If you're not familiar with Citizen Sleeper, it is kind of similar to Pentiment, actually. I played a lot of games like this year, crazy enough, and Norco, right? Like these really story-driven, choice-based, choose-your-own kind of thing, whereas Citizen Sleeper is probably the most similar to maybe Disco Elysium, where it's very dice roll based. But the space station is such a really cool space for me, because it offers a few different perspectives on what life is like within this space station. There's people who are doing a lot better than others. And there's people who are coming and going as well, who kind of you realize that maybe they're a little better off because they're not on this junker station. So you have the people who are kind of just like scrappers and kind of like just getting by, and then you have people who are like making sure that those people are fed. I think it's just one of those one of those spaces that is just such a joy to be in, because of it offers these just really nice, a really cool setting to converse with all of these characters and spend most of your time in. I wouldn't say it's doing anything like over the top special, because it is one of those things where it's just this big space that you're clicking on icons within. But it is a cool setting nonetheless. Just this space station that seems like people have been living on for a really, really long time. I think a lot of times when you're looking at sci-fi like that, these things are like stark and crisp and clean because they're these brand new places. And this is just like people are holding this thing together with like gum and like twist ties, it feels like sometimes.
Sounds like Grounded. Gum
yeah, right,
everywhere.
exactly. Yeah, the space station is just a really, really cool setting. Albeit a bit simple, but still very cool. I liked it a lot.
Love it. It turns out that this best levels category is a good place to shout out DLC, as I did with Hitman. I also want to shout out that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Of course, did they like announce their circuit pass? I forget what it's called, but the booster pass, that's what it's called, where they've just been doing an insane amount of levels adding to the game. Most of them are kind of HD slight modifications, remixes of previous stages. So I want to shout out a few of those, which would be Rainbow Road 3DS, which actually just came out last week, Sydney Sprint, New York Minute. I like those kind of real life location ones. Tokyo Blur is cool as well. But the one I wanted to really put on the list here is technically, I guess, was new in Mario Kart 8 because it's coming to Mario. It was coming to Tour, the mobile game, but it wasn't quite there yet. So technically, it was like first in 3DS, in Switch, even though they're making it. Those are all DLC maps from other games. But anyway, that is Ninja Hideaway is the name of this one. Are you a Mario Kart guy? Do you play this at all?
Drunk with friends. Not something I get into super seriously, but it is like one of the best party games of all time. So I definitely get into it every once in a while.
Ninja Hideaway is a kind of cool Japanese gardens sort of aesthetic to it. The music as well is fantastic in it. But for me, it's actually just one of the most interesting Mario Kart courses of all time, in that there is just multiple sections in it where you have a different path you can go. You can go up way high in the rafters of this building, or you can go on the ground level, or there's like this spike trap that's going up and down. You can go on that, or you can try to go underneath it. All sorts of just hidden pathways, different staircases and stuff like that. So a really cool map, and great new addition to the game. So shout outs to Mario Kart.
Hell yeah, Mario Kart. Still like going
Still
strong, clearly, man.
Well, this DLC is like, oh yeah, we're gonna add 48 new courses to the game.
Jeez.
So have fun with that over the course of the next year and a half. Just getting insane, like double the amount of courses in the game. So
that's
amazing
nuts.
Stuff.
That is nuts. I did not realize they went so hard on that. I want to shout out Signalis. That is a incredibly dreary game to be in, and there is a particular zone that is scarier than the rest of them for me, and I really enjoyed being in it despite being stressed out. And that is a section called Nowhere. So you're going through the caves in Signalis for a period, and you get to the end of the caves, and there is this just giant circular flesh pit. I mentioned this on the last episode a little bit about how Scorn and Signalis both kind of giving you weird, gross things to walk through. But specifically in Signalis, this just it's more alive looking than anywhere else you had been previously.
Okay.
Where everything else is like broken down space stations or broken down ships and kind of like not space stations necessarily, but like stations on this planet that all feel very industrial, where you go through this and it's like, okay, this something is alive here that is pretty disgusting. So you like hopped into this flesh pit, and then it has this like orange hue now, and like you're still working through your way through what looks like an old mining space, but it is all overgrown and has these kind of like fleshy bits everywhere, and it's really, really disgusting. But also the puzzles within that space are some of my favorites. There's particularly some puzzles where you have to kind of create a specific frequency on this speaker that is will give you different symbols, and then those symbols are used for different specific doors, and it forces you to kind of like move through a space and then come back to this or note take in a way that I like taking notes in games. If a game makes me take out a pen and paper, it usually is winning me over in some capacity.
Well, I like that even in that game I was taking a lot of pictures with like the certain pattern you got to recognize, but then at some point in the game you just get a little eyepiece that lets you take pictures so you can remember things. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have
yeah.
that yet, and I was cheating, I guess. But it's cool that they put that in the game itself. I like games that have a notepad in them, which is better for PC games. But that's something in whenever I'm playing the Long Dark. At the end of my session, I always go to the notepad and I just write down what I did in that day and like what my next goals are, and that's like a really fun way to engage with it. So I love a good
Absolutely,
note taking.
absolutely. So yeah, that space I think is just one of the kind of scariest in a horror game, and usually those moments are pretty. I feel like in any horror game, you're scared for so long, and then you get to a place that's even that much worse, and you're just like, I cannot believe they would do this to me. Usually those are my favorite sections in the entire in
Nice.
horror games. So just want to shout out Nowhere, a really just wildly unsettling place to be in that game.
Love it. Okay, next I'm going to take us to the world of strategy. I'm going to bring up triangle strategy here. I had a few, but I think I'm just going to rise one map up here. And I mentioned this one back on our review that me and you did for this game. This is a House Wolfort Town, I guess is what the level itself would be called. So this is the town that your kingdom controls, I guess. So already, if you're battling there, the stakes are a bit higher because these are your people. This is your town. But yeah, I think that in terms of the actual strategy element of it, this level is great because there's all sorts of rooftops with very, like, obviously you want height advantage in that game, but the rooftops are kind of tricky to get to for certain characters, and you can almost kind of get locked in on them if you choose to go them. So it's a bit of a high risk, high reward, but I mean that reward is worth it at times. You got to go for it. This map has a mixture of classic like strategy choke points where there's only like maybe 2 to 3 tiles, but then there's also kind of larger open areas which are very hard to get a handle on. And then I think that the part that rises this up is this element that I brought up on the review, where you have this defense system that the city built into this town, where the houses are rigged with oil that can just get spilled out and then lit on fire at any point as a defense mechanism if the town's getting invaded. So obviously this is kind of a last resort. I'm going to burn this house down to take out the invaders. And this level is so hard the first time you are defending it that I tried it a couple times and failed. I'm like, I guess I'm going to have to do this. So I had to burn down 1 or 2 of the houses to get a success on this mission. And that is something that you always feel because you're always coming back to this town and you're always reminded that you had to burn down this lady's house in order to defend the town. So a great element to it of the story mixed in with just the great tactics gameplay of this game. So this game has great level design across the board. I love the design of it in that way. There's many levels I could shout out, but I think that's the one I would fight for. So I'll throw that one on the list. Yeah.
Sorry, lady, about your house. That's pretty wild. That's a game that I think about going back to often too. There's too much. It was a crazy year. And I want to shout out one of my favorites. You've heard me kind of like scream it from the rooftops already, but I love Neon White, and there is a specific level in Neon White that I think is an encapsulation of everything good that game does, and it is a level. I'm going to grab kind of a group of levels. There's missions in that game, and then each mission has about like 10 levels within it, but it's usually building upon a concept, and the levels.
I had put Neon White on my list, and I'm like, I just put Neon White. I didn't actually write a level because I'm like, I need to just bring this up with Dante and see how he wants to do this, because the individual levels are so short, but they are kind of contextualized within this pack almost, right?
Exactly. So the one that I think you have not gotten to, is a bit of a spoiler.
Okay.
But it is truly one of the moments that you feel like you are going faster than I've ever felt in a video game. Like you're on supersonic mode throughout this period, and it's a series of levels called 1,000-Pound Butterfly. And you get a weapon in that is I won't even tell you what the weapon is, but you get a weapon.
I am gonna get there. I'm gonna try my best to beat this game before our top 10 lists, because I am loving it.
I absolutely adore that game. So the weapon that you get allows you to teleport to an enemy or an object and kill it immediately. So it ends up stringing together like 20 enemies in a path, and you're just crazy. Spam clicking, and it's flinging you through the entire level. you're intermixing that with all of the other weapons you've gotten previously. So you're doing like stomp jumps, you're doing rocket jumps, you're doing like grappling hook stuff, you're dashing with the sniper rifle. It really does kind of like bring it all together in that moment. And then you have this other weapon that feels, from a movement perspective, and I guess from a weapon perspective, more powerful than all of the things that you've gotten previously. So it is just like cool. You're using all of these pieces to move through these really intricately laid out puzzle arenas, just trying to get from point A to point B. And every single time you pick up that item, you're like, I'm going to go off. And you just like start flinging yourself through the entire level so fast. A really cool part about those series of levels as well is you are not required to kill all the enemies. So in the previous levels, you have to kill all the enemies to make it through the exit. This one, you just need to get to the end.
That's
so
cool.
It gives you a ton of additional enemies as kind of like different routes through the level, or as kind of like red herrings of like, hey, there's an enemy over here. But like, if you mess with him, you can still get to the end of the level, but you can still really start shaving off time.
That's
being choosy about the enemies that you're killing.
I like that because that just takes the core mechanic of the game and flips it on its head.
Yeah,
it is a nice subversion. So I'm very excited to get to that 1,000-pound butterfly.
Fantastic.
I one of the levels that I had picked out as like a contender was that one level in the pack when you're doing the level with the traps, those like laser traps.
Oh, the
and
traps.
There's the one where there's like 100 traps lined up with each other, and so you can hit it right at the start, and then you're trying to race
boom, 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 boom,
to
boom,
the traps.
Yeah.
But then if you actually want to get an ace on the level, there's at some point where you're gonna have to hit one of the later traps, and that was a really fun puzzle for me. So I thought if there's an individual level, and then also
that's up there.
I really liked. I haven't done all of these side quests yet, but I've really liked Violet's side quest. Just very fitting for her personality. They're very dark. There's spikes everywhere. If any slight wrong movement just means you get hit on a spike and die. So it's very character fitting, but I also really like the challenge and precision of those maps that she has.
Everything about Violet, her levels and her character, she's amazing.
She might come up in our next episode.
I think she might.
Love it, Neon White. Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? I feel like we could just praise the level design in general in that game, but I'm glad that you were able to pick out an individual area. Good stuff. Next up, I am going to go with Live Alive. Let's talk about Live Alive. We haven't talked about this too much. It's come up in both music and visuals, but wasn't one that I was fighting for necessarily. A couple areas. One is the western town. There's really not much here in the way of interesting level design. I'll say you're pretty much just walking around this small town that has like 10, 12 buildings in it, going into each one. There's a battle that goes on there based on your actions and whatnot. But I think for me it was just having a 2D HD aesthetic game in a western setting was very fun. So I just really like that element of it. I like the story there, I like the character and what you're doing, so I think that's why I generally like that one. But for me, the more interesting level is the Edo, Japan castle. So this is once again kind of that samurai sort of aesthetic Japanese building structure. The level design here is fantastic, where you can there's just like multiple layers. Every building essentially has maybe multiple floors or just a ground floor, but then it has the attic as well, and the attic is something you can cruise around. If you can get up there through a ladder, then you can get onto the rooftop, so you can go outside and cruise around. There's so much maze-like design of it. Not maze-like in that it's confusing, but maze-like in it's like, oh, I wonder if I can get on that roof, and then I can maybe shortcut around to get to this place. There's this kind of a stealth mechanic with the character in this area too, so you can utilize that in different ways. And then just a great mix, like good combat sequences here. Really, really cool. And I also like that the map that they give you don't really get many maps in Live because the different time eras are really not that big, so you kind of just need like a general map to remind you of roughly of things. But the map that you get for this section is almost like a hand-drawn map that someone did, and it kind of like lightly highlights where you are, but it's kind of ambiguous in a way where exactly you are. So I thought that was cool too, that they give you a weird little hand-drawn, almost like drawn on the back of a napkin kind of map for this area, and it actually worked well for a level that is maze-like but isn't too complex, so you don't need that Metroidvania-like map for it. So shout-outs to the Edo, Japan castle from Live Live.
Oh, that's a game that I'm excited to get into as well. I just gotta wait for my throwback period of the year where I go back and play what at least feels like an old game.
Yeah, you said that last time. Do you have? Is there specifically? It's like February is my month to go back, or is it just ends up being in okay, it's summer.
It's always the summer.
This game came out in summer. What are you doing, Dante?
I was playing Xenoblade.
Yeah, okay.
I had like 500 hours of Xenoblade to play.
Yeah.
I played through all 3 of those games in the summer. It's crazy.
That's a lot of hard work. I will give it up to you there. Yeah, that's impressive.
I definitely got hooked on that series in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, so it's definitely that June-July period. That'll be my 2023 June-July game. All right. This is a weird one. But I also, I haven't gotten to talk about this game at all yet.
Okay.
Stage 5. It's called Capella Magna from Vampire Survivors.
Capella Magna.
I love Vampire Survivors. I cannot tell you a game that I like. I got so addicted to this game this year, especially after getting a Steam Deck. I was like, this is perfect. But this one in particular does a lot of cool things. As this game kind of evolved over the last year, because it was in early access for most of it. They were slowly bringing out levels, and a lot of times you're kind of just running through this big space. Maybe there's some items to pick up, but it's like, all right, this is your forest level, this is your church level, this is your, you know what I mean? Like you're just going through all of these kind of generic Castlevania levels. And then you get to stage 5, and there's just so much packed into this level that if I'm choosing one to play for the night, I always pick this one. So Capella Magna is this huge, like almost like I think it's supposed to be like heaven. And there's all these like stained glass windows. Everything's pixel art, so it's not like this gorgeous thing necessarily, but like it's all these stained glass windows. And then there's these church bell enemies and these angels that are everywhere. And you're actually like, instead of fighting vampires, you're fighting angels. But there are lots of like tricky mechanics that they add in throughout this level. So there are these like Grim Reapers. There's 4 Grim Reapers that show up throughout this the course of this 30-minute level. One of the Grim Reapers makes it so like there's like a wall of fire. It's like blue flame that just constantly goes up the level and forces you to move upward. And to a point that it'll start to move faster than you are. So you have to like plan accordingly with your build before the 5-minute mark, which is so fast to have to like plan out the items that you have, because you specifically need to kill him and he will try and go off screen. So you have to have something that has the range to kill him to make sure that you don't have this this thing totally screwing up your ability to move around in this world. All of the stained glass windows break and they do splash damage to the enemies, which is really nice. And then when you kill, there's this large bell kind of boss that spawns very early in it, and you can keep killing all of these angels, and you'll have kind of a completely different group of enemies to fight. But if you kill the bell boss, they show their true form, and they're actually all like vampires in disguise, and it's like bats, and it turns back into kind of some of the traditional enemy types.
I thought the thing with that game was that there was actually no vampires in it.
Is that real? There's vampires.
Okay, I've always heard that there's like that the joke with Vampire Survivors is that there's actually no vampires themselves.
There's I guess there maybe not there might not be vampire. You're right, but there are like big bat enemies.
I know there's a lot of bats, so you can assume, but
there's bats and like there's witches and maybe no vampires. Well,
I'm blowing your mind right now.
I played a lot of this game and I was like, they're all vampires.
You would know better than I do. I'm just
I can't think of one. I can't think of a single vampire enemy type. That's hilarious.
That'll be the big DLC update 3 years from now. It's like, there's added vampire. The patch notes will just say added vampires.
There's going to be DLC that drops on like the 12th or the 14th that adds
I saw that.
new characters and like it's like really expansive for a game that like has just been adding.
Play it on your phone now too.
I know you can get it on phones as well. Man, Vampire Survivors is so good. And that is, I think, the standout level in Vampire Survivors. Tons of different objects to pick up, and like there's coffins on that level that you can break, like try and like beeline it to and make your way to that and fight a boss at them, and then you get a new enemy or get a new character to play, and tons of little unlocks in that level too that are really, really cool.
Nice. Okay, next up, I'm going to bring in Serial Cleaners. This is another game that came up in both our visuals and music category. But yeah, the levels in this game are fantastic. You know, kind of a mix of stealth. Some characters have a little bit more of like combat-ish. It's very light combat elements to it. A couple levels I want to show out here. So one is a movie set where it's interesting. There's kind of like an audience section, and then there's two separate sets on this level, and so you're kind of jumping back and forth between them. And what's fun about this level is that in the game you have 4 characters and you're swapping between the 4 of them for these different levels. But in this level you actually have 2 of them that you can go to this one door and essentially bring out the next one, so you can keep going between them. So they both have their different pros and cons of what they can do. One's a bit faster, a bit more athletic, can kind of climb stuff, whereas the other guy can like use his chainsaw to like bust through walls and stuff. So you're using the 2 of them in conjunction. It was something I hoped the game actually was going to do more, and that was a slight disappointment, is that it really didn't do it that often. So it makes this level stand out for me more because it actually did utilize that mechanic. So
nice.
And I just like that movie set aesthetic too. It's a fun setting for a level. So shout out to that level. There's a yacht level in this game where the character is specifically kind of tripping out a bit. So the level has this trippy, like weird coloration on it, and then the enemies are kind of blipping in and out of existence because he like can't remember if they were there or not, I guess is what's going on. So that adds a really fun element to the level as well. Also, this character, he's a bit of a darker character, and one of his abilities is that he can just like slide on blood. There's a lot of blood.
I've seen that. I've seen that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that you can do in this level to zip around really quick, which is a lot of fun. Police station level I want to shout out as well, which is this is where you use the hacker character, and they just really, this was like the level where they took that mechanic to its absolute fullest, where you can hack different light switch, turn cameras on and off, you can turn on things that make noise, and just a lot of fun stuff you can do. There's kind of the air duct system too that you can use to shortcut through all sorts of places. This is a really cool level. But I think maybe my favorite level in the game was the Rikers prison level. In this level, you're playing as the character who can knock out enemies, but the thing is, when you knock them out, they only get knocked out for a certain amount of time. And in each of these levels, you usually be given a couple containers that you can put an enemy in. So if you knock them out, put them in there, then they're out for the whole level. But they do it in a way where you can't knock out everyone, so there's always going to be some challenge. But on this level, I had taken out a couple guys, put them in the containers, and then you can open up the prison gates and let out a bunch of prisoners. They'll go around, create havoc. The guards will usually take them out, but maybe they'll take out a guard or two. But then I went through this very long process that I didn't need to, but I did it because it was so fun, where I would bait different prison guards into those cells, and then I would close the cells again.
Nice.
So by the end of the level, I had knocked out a couple guards, and then there was like 3 or 4 in these different prison cells who were getting mad at me. Like I was not in stealth anymore. They were like trying to get to me, but I had locked them in this prison cell the whole time. And then the last aspect to it is this character you're playing here his name is literally Psycho. So you can use this chainsaw, you can chop up enemies, and then you can like throw their corpse parts around, so you can chop off a guy's arm and then throw it at another guard to knock him out. But it was so much fun in this level because you have to get rid of all the body parts, and your truck is like way over these 2 different gates. But I found this particular angle where I can chop up the enemies and just throw their arms and legs over these fences. So I would do that, and then I went over to my truck and just picked up all these body parts and shoveled them into my truck. So this level, I ended up failing it many times as I was achieving this, like both perfect and imperfect plan. It was very messy, but it was also very fun when I finally pulled it off. So this to me was the highlight, where I just feel like I got to be so creative, and I doubt anyone else did that level in the same way I did, because it doesn't really tell you to do any of these things. But I was like, I wonder if I can, and I was able to make it happen. So nice. Shout out to Serial Cleaners, a very fun, weird, goofy stealth game that I would definitely recommend if you are into Hitman, or I'd say stealth games in general. Don't expect it to be as polished as those. It is a very janky and buggy game at times, but it was a lot of fun for me. So I think I'm going to write all 4 of those on the list. We can break it down later, but for right now, I'll just throw them all on there.
Those all sound very cool. I'm definitely happy to at least see one of those. Try and make their way up. All right, my list is getting a little light. Getting a little light. let's talk about Metal Hellsinger, specifically the level Sheol, which is the last level in the game. So slight spoilers, but it is a big shooting rhythm game. So if you're adverse to shooting and rhythm game spoilers, then so sorry, but it's really not gonna to spoil much. But the reason that level is so cool is it is leading up to one of the cooler boss fights of the year for me. So you're moving your way through this kind of like hellish landscape, as you are for most of the game. And the music is just bumping, and you're fighting all of the cool enemy types that you've seen throughout the game. So they kind of like spoon feed you slowly but surely more enemy types. In that one, you were fighting all of them at once, and you're moving your way through, and you finally get to the end, and you're like, man, I swore they talked about Serj Tankian being on this soundtrack, and I have not seen him. So Serj is the singer of System of a Down. So I was like looking really forward to hearing him throughout the game, and I was like, man, I haven't heard him at all. And then this huge boss called the Red Judge just kind of like comes up off of the edge of the platform, and it is essentially like a Tenacious D moment. Where like the boss is now Serj Tankian, and he is just like this amazing metal song from him just starts playing, and he's like teleporting you all up and down this like pretty vertical level, and you're taking him out in these like big phases. There's lots of ads to deal with. It is just like one of those incredibly cool boss fights, and then just the epicness of it, because you've been waiting, or I don't know, me personally, I was waiting for the specific soundtrack, and every single level they start with the like title card and like who sang the song and what the name of the song is, and they do not do it at all for him.
That's cool.
Yeah, that is such a cool moment. It's like, okay, if you know, you know. This is like this just incredible act that like he doesn't even need an introduction, like, and it is just the by far one of the best songs in the entire game. Nice. And it's just this epic giant like devilish god-like figure that's towering over you, and you're killing this like larger than life enemy in this kind of like doom setting. It's a really, really sick moment, and by far one of the more epic conclusions I've experienced to any game this year, let alone one that is pretty metal throughout. So it was like this really big metal moment at the end, which is pretty cool.
Sorry, what was the name of this level?
Sheol. It's Sheol. You fight the Red Judge.
Gotcha. Cool. Sounds good. Okay, let's see here. Where do I want to go next? I'll bring up Stray next. So we've talked about this quite a bit at this point, but yeah, for me, the two areas I wanted to shout out were two of the towns. One is the slums. The other one's called Midtown. For both of these are very similar reasons, where these are less linear areas where you're just set off in this town, which is it's a friendly area. There's people you can interact with. There's little bonus things you can do, like in the slums, you can go collect these different pieces of sheet music and give them to this musician. A couple of those songs, they even have a button where you can go sit next to him and just chill. For a couple of songs, I legitimately did that because they're really cool songs, and I was just like, I just want to hear his song play. So I would just go collect the music. It was a fun reward. But yeah, it's kind of this almost a point-and-click adventure game aspect to it, where you go do one thing that leads to the next thing. You get this, bucket. Knock this bucket down. One thing after another kind of thing. So I like both these areas. Kind of my favorite zones in the game.
Push over the newspaper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of little stuff like that in that one.
Yeah.
I really, that's just like such a beautiful space in general too. It's like, God, that's one where everything that they're leading you towards is covered in like these big neon signs, and it's like pulling you closer to these like objectives. It gives you like 4 objectives in a large space, and it kind of just like, all right, now move through the space and kind of interact with everything in the order that you want to. I really liked that area in Stray as well, or both of those actually.
Yeah. What do you got next?
I want to shout out the museum from Sifu. This was one of those that I kind of shouted out in visuals, and it really is just kind of one of the most gorgeous spaces in Sifu, and one of my personal favorite levels to have to redo over and over again. So you kind of like, you walk in, and it's almost like this beautiful white museum, very Smithsonian Art Museum-esque, where it's just like very white, but then there's like tons of modern art and lots of like statues and just stuff strewn throughout this entire space. And you're working your way all the way up to the top of the museum to eventually fight the artist who's the boss fight in that one. Also my favorite fight in the entire game, I'd say. So it is just this really cool environment to work your way through and defeat all of the enemies. And there are really cool shortcut opportunities in that one where you're working your way up this stairwell, but then there's elevators as well that you get like key cards for, and you can kind of move your way through gates and stuff like that. So it does simplify it as you move through those levels again, because you can kind of unlock these things permanently. So it kind of changes the way that you pace your way through the level, which is really cool, because the most important part of that game is making it from the start of the level to the end boss without taking too many deaths. If you die too many times, you get to old age, and you have to beat the entire game before you die. So it's one of those things where if you take a lot of damage in one level, it really does kind of like screw you for the later levels. You have to kind of go through and be as young as possible by the end. And so those shortcuts are really cool. And then you finally get to this stunning boss fight where it is you're fighting this woman with this like 3-chain nunchuck staff thing, and she's just kind of got this like really dancey art style to the way that she moves around, and she's fighting you in this beautiful like snow like area. It's almost like Kill Bill or something like that, where you're like fighting in this just like big beautiful space with tons of snow, and you're like moving through it, and the snow is moving as you kind of have this like flowy movement to your character. And then when you switch to the second phase of that boss fight, it ends up being like you're almost like in an oil well, or it's this almost like watery kind of space with like the water like splashes up on the sides, but all the water is just like oil. It's like black ink or something like that. Cool. And it just has this really neat visual style to it, and it kind of pushes further into the concept of this is like the artist that you're fighting, and you're fighting in what feels almost like a painting or something like that. It's really, really sick. Loved the museum.
Love it. Next up, I'm going to take it back to an open world game here with Horizon Forbidden West. So the couple areas that I wanted to shout out in particular. One would be the ruins of Las Vegas. I guess it would be more of a level, I guess you would describe it as, where you go to the ruins, they're covered in sand, but then you go down to this kind of watery, this underwater sequence, which is pretty cool. Another town that I really liked is called Fall's Edge. It is a waterfall that's here it's like this little town on the top of a waterfall. The water's rushing through. I like just walking through there. It looked really, really beautiful and just cool to see what people are doing there. But the one that I would truly fight for is the town that you come across pretty early on in the game called Plainsong. Plainsong is just this pretty like tall, vertically sprawling town, city, whatever you want to call it, kind of built of bamboo and wood. And for me, it was just one of these. We talked about Lendal and how it's able to like have the scale of a true city in a way.
Yeah,
I feel like this place had the scale in terms of just how many people there were and how big it was of a town, where if you just walk through here, there's so many NPCs. You know, some were maybe working at the bar, some maybe lounging in the bath, or some are just reading, some are just walking around doing whatever it is. But I think for me, one of the most surprising moments when I was walking through on my PS4 was not liking this moment, but I was just walking through, and just like an entire like classroom's worth of kids, like 20 kids, just like ran through. They're playing like tag or hide and seek, whatever they're playing, but they just like ran by, and I was like, wow, this truly has like the scale of like an actual city's worth of people and how big it is. And I also like in open world games when there's like a logic to the area, and this whole area has like huge like farmland sprawling out around it, so like there's kind of context for how these people can survive here and stuff like that. So yeah, Plainsong for me, beautiful place, truly feels real. It's also fun just walking around it, the verticality, almost kind of the hedge we were talking about in Grounded, where you're kind of walking on branches and stuff. It feels like it's a really, really cool city.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds incredible. There's that game is so incredibly gorgeous that I still feel like I need to wrap it up and see kind of what it has to show me still, even if I wasn't like
Eh.
jiving with the gameplay as much. I still want to see it.
I'm not a big fan of
It's
the
pretty funny.
ending of that game, but
Oh no!
there's some cool. I mean, I don't know. It's a pretty mid game for me in general, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't. If you've been to Plain Song, you've done the best part in my mind.
Oh,
So
well, I have. So
yeah,
wild. All I have left is a pretty big one, so I don't know if you want to do a couple more. I think there is one that's probably on both of our lists. That
4 more games here.
Yeah.
I think I know what yours is. How about you bring it up and I can
Yeah.
go through mine.
Okay, very cool. So I have a couple levels from God of War Ragnarok that I definitely want to shout out. I know one that you were particularly fond of. I was also quite fond of, which is Svartalfheim.
Yes,
I hope I'm not butchering that. I think there is an F in there somewhere. And there's a few reasons I really love this place. One, it is one of the new areas that you get to experience. God of War Ragnarok does take you back through some realms that you've seen previously. It does kind of flip some of them on their head because you were experiencing Fimbulwinter everywhere. So it is kind of things are either snowy or hotter or there's gases or something. But Svartalfheim in general kind of gives you kind of a look at a really lived in place in a way that a lot of the rest of the game doesn't. I think it's really cool that and not just that, like the boat is such an important part of God of War 2018, and you really don't use the boat that much in this game outside of a few sections. And this is one of the biggest areas where you are kind of like moving your way through this large lake that is kind of reminiscent to the Lake of the Nine in the first game. But just being able to be in this the town of the dwarves is really cool because it is one of those things where you initially are kind of coming up to it and you see everybody kind of like doing their thing and they're like just living their lives, and you move through you go farther and farther, and then you're like, oh man, everybody's hiding from us. So everybody like shuts their doors and slams their doors as you're walking through, and kind of you eventually get to the tavern, which feels once again like all of these places that are just a little bit smaller than Kratos, which is kind of entertaining to watch him kind of like be in this space that's too big for him. But everything kind of starts to get a little bit destroyed when you see some of the I do not know how to say that, but essentially I'm
not even gonna try and correct you on
that. Nice. But essentially like Odin's military, his warriors kind of come down and start kind of rifling through the place and destroying pieces. So you end up seeing like stuff with apples knocked over, and like just kind of it looks like the place gets kind of beat up a little bit. But then in that same level there are multiple big side sections. So one of my favorite pieces is part of a side quest where it is Mimir focused, and he is trying to save this whale that he had trapped in this space, and you don't even know it's there. It's just this like island that's in the middle of it, and then you kind of signal the whale to get up, and it's just this cool thing where it's like you realize, oh, that wasn't an island, that was a whole being, and it rises up and it becomes this really, really like majestic creature that you're trying to free. So that's really a cool moment where it just kind of like changes the entire layout of the level. And then additionally, that is where the caverns where you find Tyr are as well. So you do have this kind of like nice variation. There's also, man, that space is so big. I'm actually like remembering more and more because that's also where you get the drop in your spear. So you have this period where you get to move through. Like you have the tram section in that level. You also have the space where you do get like actually work your way up the mountain and get the drop near spear where you get to meet the mermaid. So like really, really cool kind of moment there where it really subverts your expectations of who you're going to see. Just like really, I think that level alone has the most variety. And you're doing kind of the most different things while also being like just this gorgeous lakeland that you get to kind of paddle through and hear all of Mimir's stories. And it just kind of, it is one of the few that's very reminiscent to some of the best parts of 2019 or 2018. And then while also doing some, I don't know, just having some really, really cool moments strewn throughout.
Cool. What's the other God of War area?
really loved Alfheim this time around.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I like Alfheim in general. I liked it in the first game also. I know that's kind of maybe a little back and forth for people, but that has the puzzles that I think are my favorite puzzles in the game, where you
Sure.
just
Yeah.
throw the axe through the like different overgrowth. But the reason that Alfheim ended up being so high on my list this time around was because there is the two different natures of Alfheim. You are working your way through that big gorgeous palace, and there's those kind of like that has all of the like rebounding puzzles in it, and you're seeing like tier jump from different pillars and stuff like that. It's like big huge guy moving through this space, and it's just gorgeous, tons of gold and just like beautiful foliage and stuff like that, and you're seeing the kind of war happen in kind of just the visuals itself, because the light elves are trying to get more of this light well. So you have these big shining areas, and then you have the dark elves who are trying to have this kind of almost like flood from like Halo overgrowth take over everything. And you kind of see that kind of that balance happening in motion. But then when you're outside of the like kind of palace itself, it's this beautiful desert that is kind of has this sandstorm going through it, and there is a side quest to have the Song of the Sands kind of start back up, which kind of get rid of the sandstorm. And when you make your way through that, you end up releasing these like large jellyfish that are singing this song that kind of move through the air, and they're beautiful, and they're like have this the kind of bioluminescence thing happen as they're kind of moving through the sky. And I just thought like just being in that outside sandy space was just gorgeous. I thought that was one of the prettier zones in the game.
Nice.
Yeah, and just thought it was a pleasure to be in.
Good stuff. Okay, I'll quick rifle off two, and then I have two more that I want to put on the list. So, A Plague Tale, a Requiem has a couple cool areas. One is a vault where you pretty much just keep going down this cave, and then just like almost like it's not quite on the Elden Ring scale of Silver River or something, but like it just never ends, where you just go what starts out as a cave, and then it's like a tomb, and then it's like a crypt, and then it's like this underground mine. It's like it's crazy. You keep going down and down. It's really cool. And then also similar to how Stray, it's interesting when you get to those town areas, because then it's like this open area. It's like a nice pacing adjustment, and then it's like a more open. That's the same thing for the island of Lacuna in A Plague Tale Requiem. It takes a few hours. When you get there, it's this beautiful island. It's very open. You can kind of just explore for really as long as you want before you head on to the next like story mission. So I like those areas. I'm not going to put them on the list though. And then Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I think the level design is great all the way through here. It's very kind of Mario 3D world-ish, right? The one level I would have shouted at would be the final level, and it's particularly because there's just some crazy, like I wouldn't think that I would need to hold back on spoilers for the ending of a Kirby game, but it truly is so wild and unexpected and over the top that it is amazing. Like if people aren't going to play this game, you should just YouTube that cutscene that happens in the end of the game. It's insane. It's so wild. I don't think it's going to be a contender for me, so I'll just leave it off because we already have so many things on this list. But the two games that I do want to put on the list and have a chance here would be Tunic. So this is a tricky one too. It's like, where do you cut off what a level is? I wrote down the Frogs domain. I like that area. But the one that I think I would put on the list is, I just called it the overworld starting zone, which I don't know if that's already too big of an area, but I'm kind of specifically talking about
foresty.
What's that?
The like foresty kind of area that you begin the game in.
Yeah, I mean the forest is more to the east, like the woods, but I guess the overworld is like there's that kind of main town area there.
Yeah,
you can go down to the south, and there's like the beach. Up on the north, there's like the big walls that would lead up to the mountain, and then to the west, I guess. I don't know, I forget what that area is called, but there's kind of the bridges out that way. Yeah. But yeah, I think for me, the reason I'd want to shout this out is because if you watch like a trailer or something, and the character's walking through that area, but when you actually played that game, and when you're specifically at the end, just when you look at it, it's like, man, every one of these like cracks and crevices is like some hidden pathway to something. There's just so much hidden there that there's nothing that's blocking you. At the very start of the game, you could have done all these crazy shortcuts, but you just didn't really think to go in this specific corner or behind this wall or something like that. And I think for me, like that surprise of it, where it's like this place has not changed at all, yet it has changed so much, is so cool. And I think that happens all over the place in every area of the game. But I think for me, particularly that overworld, because that is the connecting tissue between all those different areas. You're gonna, if you're going for any other place, you go through there on the way there, and just all the ways that you create shortcuts through there, I think is pretty fantastic. There's a lot of hidden stuff in there too. So yeah, I wanted to shout out the kind of general overworld from Tunic. I'm specifically talking about that starting zone, though.
It's a beautiful game too. It's just like so nice to be able to move through that, and specifically from that middle area, you do get to see bits and pieces of almost every zone and see what they have to offer as well. So it does give you a ton in a little space, which, as you said, grows as you learn more about it, which is pretty cool.
I think too, like visually, I think it's my favorite area in the game. It's kind of simple in that way, but I don't know. There's something familiar about it too. The music that plays there is maybe my favorite song in the game, so I just love that main area.
Really like the librarians area as well.
That was cool.
Like, I thought that was super cool. Like tower. It's pretty.
Yeah. And then, okay, my last game to shout out here is Tinykin, which I think went super under the radar, but so many people would love this game because it is a very simple 3D platforming collectathon. If you love Super Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, Banjo, because you like that era of games, then this is just one of those, but modern. Obviously, it's more Pikmin as a comparison, but I think this game has more platforming than Pikmin does, where that's more about problem solving and such. But I love Tinykin. I hope more people check this out. It's on Game Pass, so it's easy to check out. Once again, I mentioned this in the visuals episode that we did, where this is kind of got that grounded aesthetic too, where you were a tiny little creature inside of a house going through these different areas. So the 3 levels that I wanted to shout out, this is another game too, where like every level is fantastic, and I'd shout out all of them, but specifically 3 areas. One is the City of Sanctar. This is the living room in the house. So there's like a cat climber here with all these different levels. There's a CRT TV that you can go up and through and in between and all that stuff. There's a piano. There's a cardboard fort that's kind of built there. That's a kind of a main hub in the level. So this is a very fun place. With all these levels, you always start kind of on the ground, and you can see all the tabletops, the countertops, and even the shelves and stuff above it. And it's like such a task when you finally get to the top of those things. And it's always feels great when you finally get to the top of these levels.
Nice.
Similarly, the Lands of Ambrose is the name of the kitchen level. This just has all the fun things you'd expect, going through the countertops, jumping through the sink, cooking food as you're doing is like a mini game you're doing in that, creating the different connections between the dinner table and then the countertops and all these different zones. And then lastly, I think this is kind of the final area in the game too, is Solarian Park is what it's called. This is the child's room. It's kind of a playroom, and there's just toys and things to interact with everywhere, and it's so fun, where there is a kind of a Hot Wheels like course that's on the ground, and you're kind of bringing through different pieces of the track. That's part of the puzzle level, and then eventually you can do the race itself, and that's really cool. That's and really just cool. So much fun stuff, where it's like all the kind of dinosaur that's floating from the roof, so you can get on top of that and then dive down to different areas of the map and all that stuff. So yeah, just the level design is, this game never really does anything unexpected or surprising, but it's like I cannot remember the last time I had such a great time just playing a 3D collectathon, just picking up things, walking through. It's not too difficult. There's not really combat in the game. It's just such a chill and enjoyable experience. So love Tinykin. I think for me, the level design is what stands out to me the most.
I didn't realize that was a collectathon. I have a homie who is obsessed with those. It's like his favorite style of game, so I will have to recommend that to him as well. The game looks cool. You're not the first person I've heard kind of sing its praises this year, so I definitely want to check that out as well. Man, the list grows.
It does, but I think that is where it stops growing, unless you have a last-minute thing that you forgot.
No, I'm saying the backlog list.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
No, I think that's lists. A good place to call it and start digging into what we have here. This is a lengthy one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so with that, let's take our last break of the show, and then we'll come back, and we will somehow parse this list of 40, 50 levels down to a top 5. That is going to be very hard.
My God.
Let's do that when we come right back. Dante, we are back. In the previous episodes, I rifled off the names of the things that we had eligible. That would take me so long right now. I'll just rifle off the games that we have, not necessarily every individual level, just as a reminder for the audio listeners. So on the list, we have Sniper Elite 5, Salt. Sorry, it's Salt and Sacrifice, or is it Sanctuary?
Yeah, Salt and Sacrifice. Salt and Sanctuary was the first one.
Sniper Elite 5, Salt and Sacrifice, Elden Ring, Hitman 3, Pentiment Grounded, Citizen Sleeper, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Signalis, Triangle Strategy, Neon White, Live Live, Vampire Survivors, Serial Cleaners, Metal Hellsinger, Stray, Sifu, Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, Tunic, and Tinykin. Those are the contenders that we have. It doesn't even fit on one page of my scrolling. I think maybe our first place to go here. For me, I honestly don't really have an immediate lock. I need to like talk through some of this stuff, but maybe a good place for us to go is to parse down some games that have multiple nominees. Not that there needs to be a limit of one per game, but I'm looking at Elden Ring, and we have 8 here. I want to see this shrink to at least 2 right now, just for our sake.
For sure.
2? I think for now
they're going to be in the top 5, though, right? So at least I'm kidding.
Okay, let's shrink it down to 3 then for now, and then we can talk about them more. For me, Siofra is like that's a lock.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a lock for top 5, but lock for like the Elden Ring picks at least.
I think as much as I love it, Rhea Lucaria might be able to go for me. I can just
okay. I think I agree.
Like Landal, Siofra come above that for me.
Yeah. I'm just doing this so I have this list for future, but okay, let's get rid of that then. I also would love to see Redmane Castle stay.
Okay.
As one of the contenders. How do you feel about that?
Cool.
I think we can get rid of Castle Morn. I personally have a big connection with it, but I think some of these other levels are without a doubt more impressive.
Are you choosing Castle Redmane over Stormvale?
No, I'm just saying that I think if we're picking 3, Redmane seems like kind of a lock for me, maybe.
Yeah.
I'll get rid of Morn, simplicity's sake. I think, okay, maybe for me, the easy one is, I think Farum Azula is maybe one of my least favorite areas in the game. This is still a great game that has great design for the most part all around, so that's not saying it's bad.
Smaller spaces though too.
It's also the most linear. Now obviously there is a lot of shortcuts and stuff, but it's not really the same. I think for when you keep getting surprised with all these different open world areas in the game, to go to Farum Azula and it not be that was like, okay,
I get
this is how we're ending the game.
I think it's visually one of the coolest spaces out of all.
I agree with that. Those tornadoes and the flying creatures are very menacing and cool.
But moving through the level itself, I'd say, is not as exciting as some of these others.
Okay, let's get rid of that one. What's the weak spot for you? What's the Jenga piece here?
I think it's so weird because it's such a large space and it encompasses so much, but I think Liurnia actually goes out of the bunch here.
I agree.
This is where I think things get really tough for me because I'm between Stormvale and Castle Redmane. I need to see Landale stay, I think. And mainly because that area also changes, which is such a cool moment. That's when true. You do light the urn and everything is just covered in sand. It looks like you destroyed the world almost when you come back to this. It's such a clever moment. So
we could leave these for now. We could come back to them later if we want.
I think that's what I'm between. It's either Castle Redmane or Stormvale for me, and I think
I'm happy to make it easier. I would get rid of either one of those two. Should we just get rid of both then? Maybe.
Oh,
because we have so many things on the list. 2 Elden Ring contenders seems good. We can always bring them back if we feel we made a mistake. But I think for me, right off the hop, Siofra is probably my number 1 on the Elden Ring. So I'm happy to drop these 2 just because they are.
That'll be an interesting conversation because I think Landale's mine.
We'll have to get down to brass tacks later. But for now, should we? As much as we love castles, I mean, I guess Lindal has some castle element to it, so we're not getting rid of every castle. But let's do that for our own sake here. I'll also make things a bit easier and go to my serial cleaners pick. And I think I did a pretty good job of explaining why Rikers is cool.
They all sound super fun.
But I'll take out the other 3 and keep Rikers on the list there.
Yeah.
And I mean, the easy one for me is I actively dislike Alfheim and God of War Ragnarok. So I don't know how you feel about that. If that was is that to go? But we don't have to do it now. But I'll say it.
I actually, those are such a toss up for me. Okay. I like them both equally, I'd say. But
okay. Well, if you like them equally, and I significantly like Svartalheim more than Alfheim, should we just
bye? Okay. Yeah, that's I think fair. You got wild spelling on that. Isn't
Which
it
one?
like on Svartle? Isn't it
I
Svartle?
put an N instead of a T.
You have an F
Oh
in
wait,
it?
Svartalheim.
Fine.
Svartalheim?
It's hold on.
Isn't it Heim?
It's crazy
Because it's like
spelled.
Heimdall is spelled like that.
No, I got you. I'm gonna Discord you it real quick. It's crazy spelling. That's why I was like falling over it, trying to say it out loud.
Okay. I think, you know what? I wrote it in my notes like that, so I just assumed that was correct for the last few
There we
weeks.
go.
So like it's sitting in my list.
I needed that F represented for some reason because
it is a fun word.
It is consonant in the middle of these flowy ass words is crazy. Sorry. I think maybe you have a lot that have a bunch of levels still, or not a lot, but like I'd say maybe reducing this down to 1 or 2 Tinykin levels could be a safe place to go as well.
All right. I think I would go with... I'll get rid of the kitchen, and this is a bit tricky. It's funny because like one of these is the first level in the game and one of them is the last one. So like one of them is quite a bit simpler where you only have like one of the Pikmin type creatures in the game, I think, and then the other one you have like all 4 or 5 of them at your disposal. I'll go with Solarian Park as the pick there. So there you go. I did that.
And then let's dig into Grounded.
Yeah, I think for myself, I would go Sandbox or Hedge over Koi Pond.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's do
Koi
that.
Pond's a really cool moment and was like my Yatta moment where I was just like super excited. But
Yatta moment? What does that mean? I've never heard that.
Heroes? You ever seen the show Heroes?
That sounds like what Link does. Yatta! Maybe not.
Yeah,
it's not quite like
it's what one of the characters he speaks only Japanese.
I like it though. Yatta. It speaks for itself in a way.
Yeah.
And then this is tricky, right? Because you haven't encountered the Sandbox yet.
Yeah.
I do love the Hedge. So that's where it becomes a bit tricky. Where Sandbox would be my pick of the 2, but you haven't been there, so that is a difficult decision.
Like it's safe to say, like I think we have agreed so far on Grounded, and if this is just something I haven't seen yet, I'm sure I will love it. So I trust you here, but like I also think the Hedge is such an incredible moment also. So
we could leave it for now if you want, if you want to get rid of Hedge, then I'm okay with that. But if you want to leave it, I'm also cool with that.
If you think Sandbox is an absolute lock over Hedge, but if it's like they're kind of even, I have experience with Hedge. So
let's keep Sandbox. Okay. It's cool. Okay, moving along here. I think I'm, as much as I really like Live, that section, I can let it go because I think just this list is a bunch of killers and that's not going to keep up in the pace and you haven't played it. So I'll get rid of that one.
Do you have a pick on one of the levels in Stray between the slums and Midtown?
I think I'd go slums, but I do like both of them quite a bit. They're different. I think slums is a bit more interesting. You actually get to do more there than Midtown in terms of that like collecting element and interaction and stuff like that. And you do come back to slums as well, which is fun. Is you come back to it like you go there early on in the game and then you go do a couple other levels and things are kind of sketchy and then you come back to slums and that's a cool moment to like, oh, I'm home again. That's fun. So I think I'd go slums. You agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree. I have had more of a memorable experience with slums. I think that's also when you get the robot, or you get the robot right before that as well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty close to it. How do you feel about I guess Metal Hellsinger and Sifu is where I'm looking at. Sifu feels like it could be a top 5 contender, but I'm really curious on Metal Hellsinger. Is that a top 5?
Yeah, so Metal Hellsinger lives and breathes on that boss fight. Where it actually feels like one that I'd be comfortable letting go. It is I feel like Metal Hellsinger got its due in in the music, so it's a little bit, I think the level's exciting because the music's so good, right? So it might, if that music wasn't there, I don't think this level would be this huge experience for me.
Plus, we did nominate that for music, and it is a winner.
Exactly. So I think I'm comfortable with that. I'm also comfortable losing. Where'd it go? Dreadstone Peak and Salt and Sacrifice. While it is a really cool stark contrast between some of the other things you're doing in that game, I feel like I am just like flying through these levels to get from enemy to enemy in a way that I'm not like taking it in the way that I do with some of these other games.
I will say I love the description you gave for that one, and I also love the name of it. That's a fucking
Yeah.
badass name.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I think for the sake of Sniper Elite 5, I would kick it down to Spy Academy in terms of being maybe my individual favorite level in the game, both mechanically, both visually. So I'll do that as well, just to make things easier for us. We're kind of plugging through this. What about Pentiment? Is that like a top 5 contender for you?
It's up there. I think the monastery is one of the coolest zones in that entire game and does change enough that it keeps feeling new in a way that I think is really cool. It's really pretty. It's really pretty. And it is one of, despite kind of going against the church from my personal perspective, of how I took that storyline, because you just choose kind of what direction you want to go. I was in the monastery a ton, and doing stuff in the monastery I found to be some of the most exciting moments. And I felt like I was finding most of the cool clues or interesting things about characters throughout the monastery as well. So I actually think I want to keep the monastery for now. I'd say if we're talking about a game like that, I would be more willing to let go of the space station from Citizen Sleeper. I think that is more interesting because of the characters that you're dealing with than it is about the space itself. Even though I do like being in that space, I think the monastery in Pentiment is a character in its own right, almost.
Okay, let's do that, and then I will also get rid of Mario Kart. It's a great level, but I think there's the quality of levels that we got here. It's not gonna keep up, but they've released I guess 24 new maps this year for Mario Kart already, and that's like maybe far and away the best, most interesting one. So that's not an easy task, and they rose to the occasion there. So we're getting down to it. Let me read off the list here for the audio listeners. So Spy Academy from Sniper Elite 5, both the capital city of Lindal and Sealfur River, I guess Ansel River, we'll say the underworld almost, in Elden Ring. Ambrose Island from Hitman 3, Monastery from Pentiment, Sandbox from Grounded, Nowhere from Signalis, House Wolfort Town from Triangle Strategy, 1,000-Pound Butterfly, Neon White, Capella Magna, Vampire Survivors, Rikers from Serial Cleaners, The Slums from Stray, The Museum from Sifu, Plain Song from Horizon Forbidden West, Svartalheim from God of War Ragnarok, The Overworld of Tunic, I guess the starting zone, whatever you want to call that, and then Solarian Park from Tinykin. I want to ask you about Vampire Survivors because for me, like I don't think I've gotten there yet to that zone. But so far, all the levels, like there's different boss fights or things, but for the most part, it feels like
makes you move through.
Yeah, like they look slightly different, or like the library, right? It's like more horizontal, but they don't really feel like worlds different. But this one actually does sound like it is, has the glass smashing mechanic that you mentioned. So that's interesting. Like there seems like there's more layers on it. So that's cool. But is it a top 5?
I don't think so. I wanted to shout out some compelling differences in that level that I think make it one of the better ones out of the bunch. But that game is just all gameplay for me. I don't think the levels are necessarily the thing that are taking it over the top. It's just the most fun level to do that gameplay loop in.
Cool.
So
now that we're getting down to it, I think I'm okay to let go of Stray at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I'd also, as sad as I'd be to see it go, feel comfortable letting Signalis go. That is still one of my favorite zones in that game, and it is very dark and dreary and uncomfortable. But I feel like that game as a whole is really more interesting than maybe a particular area.
Oh, this is where it gets tricky. We're down to We're down to like 12-ish picks here. Got to get rid of a few more.
I have a lock at the moment.
You have a lock?
Yeah.
What's the lock?
1,000-Pound Butterfly from Neon White.
Okay. I was going to say, like, while I haven't gotten there yet, the quality of level design that I've experienced so far, for me, like, I agree with that, even if I haven't seen that level myself. I'm happy with that.
By far an incredible combination of everything good that game does, all in the course of like 10 very small levels, and
Mhm.
if you have seen some things that you've enjoyed in that game so far, this is like the salad. This is like
Yeah.
this is the
No, I mean
cocktail.
everything you've described too. Like I cannot wait to get to
It
that
is
level and
so
experience it.
fun. It is so fun. These are the ones where you're gonna have like a 2-second finish to
Mhm.
get an ace. It's gonna feel like you
That's
just
crazy.
teleported to the end of the map. It's a blast.
I'm gonna have to get hopped up on caffeine before I try that level. That sounds
That game
difficult.
definitely will have you like shaking a little bit by the end of it. It's a sweaty one.
Mm-hmm. I think at this point I'm happy to let go of triangle strategy because I think it would maybe be 6th or 7th on my list at this point, and we just have so many great levels here remaining that I'm gonna drop that one out.
This is getting really
Oh,
tough now.
this
This
is
is getting
getting
really,
tough.
really tough.
I think for me, I don't think you'll necessarily agree with this, but I'll say it, which is that I think I have so many issues with the level design in God of War that as much as I like Svartalheim, it still is something that like I don't care about the puzzles in it. Like that those actively bothered me. So I have issues with parts of it, so I'm okay to get rid of it at this point. So that would be one I'll put out there. And then Horizon, I love
Yeah,
that city, but I think when we're talking about the best of the year, it's not quite going to make the
I
cut. If
think
we're talking about open worlds, it's one of the best open worlds of this year, but this individual section is a bit
I
not going to
was
hold up.
going to propose that. I was like, if you're getting rid of Svartalfheim, you have to get rid of Horizon too, because I would hate to
Get
see
rid of one
that
Sony first
go.
party, you get rid of them all.
Yeah, I know. It was just like I was like I would, because I would take that over anything in Horizon so far.
Mhm.
So I was like, if I see one go, I have to see both go. So you can get rid of
So
Svartalfheim as well.
we get rid of
It's
it.
fine.
Okay,
It's
I
fine.
appreciate that.
I that game runs on pure story and combat fuel for me too. So I don't think any particular level was like peak level design, even though they are pretty spaces to be in.
We have 10 levels left, and we have locked one, so we have 4 slots between 10 levels. Oh God, this is
I can let the museum go. That's another
really
game.
okay. I did
Yeah,
not think you'd go there, but
I love that zone, but that's another game where I'm like, I'm here for the combat. It's so fun to just play that game that I could have done it in literally a blank space and had a blast. So like, it's
gotcha.
one of the coolest levels in that game, but
You made a good case for it for sure.
yeah, it deserved that top 10 slot at least.
So we could have multiple levels from one game, but I think I'd be more a fan of variety. So with that being said, I'm kind of down to see one Elden Ring pick here, and then lock one of those now. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I just feel like we're gonna go in very different directions.
Yeah, I'm firmly on Siofra for that surprise, that mind-blowing moment to me. Elden Ring has a lot of those, and that is by far the biggest wow moment in the game. Now, I see where you're coming from because I think the actual level the combat going through it is probably more interesting in Lindal, and that's also, I mean, they're both pretty huge areas when you factor them in that way. So that's the thing. Yeah, like what do you weigh for this?
That's where I'm struggling. Like I'm thinking of like the enemy types. I'm thinking about like the story implications that are happening in Lindal. And then I think about like Steel for River. You have that like what a thrill moment, like the MGS3 ladder. You do have that like kind of going down the elevator, and it is beautiful. I remember like pausing the game and because that game does pause, which is crazy. Right? That game pauses.
I don't think so.
Right?
Maybe like through the PlayStation you can like do it or something.
Maybe
like that.
Maybe I didn't pause it, but I remember like screaming to like make my girlfriend watch and like see it. So maybe I just like went back to the top and went down or something like that. But I remember like stopping what I was doing to make it so she could witness what I was witnessing, which was spectacular going down into that space. But once you're down there, you're just killing a bunch of dudes with horns, running away from a bunch of arrows. Right? I don't feel like there's any huge awe-inspiring moments in Siofra outside of that for me.
What about the element of foreshadow that it has too, where you're seeing Mog's zone up there, and for me, once again, didn't explore it for a long time. Even seeing the structures above, and you're like, I'm probably gonna get up there at some point. And once again, that's a big surprising area when you get back to it and stuff like that.
Great moments, as well as the spirit, the boss fight with that zone. I think is included in this, and I really love that too. I do like moving through and like lighting all the fires and trying to find your way through the space.
Yeah,
but I'm just thinking of like the design of Langdal being so sick with like the dead dragon wing and like it being able to climb all the way up the dragon and get to like the top parts of the city. The tree enemies that are all like that have like those crazy like flowers growing off of them that are like guarding the top of the tree. Both are so good.
I wonder if the conversation here is that Elden Ring is just that good that it gets 2 picks. So if we want that to happen, we can circle around, we can take out some more, and then we can come back to it. I think this seems like a hard decision, but I think I'm actually okay to get rid of Tunic here. I that's a hard thing to say. But I think it's also, for me, it doesn't feel, that game is so interconnected that it's hard to look at that as like one specific level, right? Which I think with Elden Ring, these 2 areas, even though this is a big open world, it does feel like we can kind of zone in a bit more. So maybe that's a place to get rid of Tunic here. And plus Tunic, I think won music, is in a music winner and visuals, so it's got its flowers already.
A very hard time identifying a particular zone to pick in Tunic, and that's why I didn't even make my best list, which is pretty crazy. And I think your reasoning for the overworld though was excellent, and is like if you were to choose one, that is kind of cheating, but I think a great answer as well, and your reasoning behind it was excellent. So
I will also
fantastic top 10.
At this point, I'm okay to get rid of Tinykin as well. Because I think when it comes down to it, I'd rather see 2 Elden Ring picks than the Tinykin pick, and that's where some of these other things that wouldn't necessarily be the case. So I'll get rid of Tinykin.
We still might have to reduce it down to 1 Elden Ring pick. We'll see here, because this is getting into really crazy territory.
We are down to 7 contenders for 4 slots.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't want to be mean and all, but I think this is where I could see Pentiment going. Yeah. Like, is that really a top 5 contender with the hitters? I know you haven't played 3 of these, so that's, well, actually 4 of these you haven't experienced, so that's a bit tricky for you to say. So maybe that's mean of me to have 4 picks and you only have 1, and I'm aiming the sights at yours.
You played some of Pentiment, right?
Yeah, I mean that's true. I have walked around the monastery. I have not seen these moments in Act 2 or 3, so that's part of it, and I do think it's great. But for me, it's just like, compare that to a Hitman level, like no fucking chance.
Yeah,
like
no chance. No chance. I agree, no chance in that capacity. And it seems like Serial Cleaners has so much. What's the name of that kind of gameplay? Immersive, not immersive.
Immersive simmy kind of elements to it,
yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, which always end up, I think, pulling towards the top of a list because you feel like there's so many different things you can do in a space. So but that Pentiment also has that a little bit. You can choose how you move through this space to tackle specific things. Like there's a period where you have to go feed the monks and they're trapped in a space, and you can go convince people to let you through a door, or you can go into the catacombs and make your way up and sneak into the library. So it does have a little bit of that kind of like emergent gameplay. That's what I was looking for. That kind of emergent gameplay moments as well, where you really do get to choose how you move through the monastery. I really like it. I'm having a hard time with this group in general now. Because,
I think we need to shrink Elden Ring to 1 at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And you're hard locked on Seal for River, aren't you?
That is for me a number 1, but like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Throw some shade at Lindall to get my way? Like, it is so good that I think I'd be okay with it at this point, from the perspective that I want to see maybe some of my heart
I'm doing
picks
the
on
same
here.
thing. I was about
Yeah.
to do the same thing. I'm like, well, if it's choosing your favorite kid at this point. Like it's like,
Exactly.
okay, I really love both, but if you feel so strongly about Siofra, I'd be willing to get rid of Lindal. We're about to like shave our head to buy a comb. You know what I mean? Or something like that. I don't know what that term is. It's a gift giving.
I don't know what it means, but I like it. It's one of
Yeah.
those ones that speaks for itself.
Somebody knows what I'm talking about, but I butchered it entirely.
So Dante, I'll give it to you. Which Elden Ring level is moving on here?
I'm gonna be selfish because you got a lot of games on here, and I'm gonna say Leyendal is
okay. Let's do it.
Taking the top spot for me.
Mm-hmm. And let's move that into the lock category. At this point,
so 3 options out of, or we have 5 options. We need to lock in 3 now.
Yeah, I think one move I'd be okay to make is the Hitman level. No, it's very hard to kick a Hitman level out of the best levels contender. I think there's a slight element here of being DLC, and if it was my all-time favorite Hitman trilogy level, then I would, it'd be a different story. But I think I'd like to maybe represent some of these newer games more.
I was going to ask, would you pick Ambrose Island or Spy Academy? Because it's kind of having the same conversation, right?
Yeah, I think I would go Spy Academy, actually.
Okay.
I like Hitman more as a game, I think, overall. But I'm also, obviously we are picking individual levels here. But the fact that my contenders list had every Sniper Elite level is like, I would feel heartbroken if Sniper Elite didn't make it in the top 5 at all. Like, that would feel wrong,
I'd say right now, the only thing that it sounds incredible, but it sounds like it is between Rikers from Serial Cleaners and Monastery from Pentiment.
The sandbox, which one is cut? Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because it sounds like Spy Academy is a lock because you loved every single level, and this is the one that rose to the top. And Sandbox is something that sounds like you're incredibly passionate about as well. And I'm very excited to get to this point. It just seems like I'm gonna have a hard time the same way that I think you're gonna have a hard time getting rid of Pentiment versus Serial Cleaners. But Serial Cleaners sounds like such an excellent situation you found within that level as well, where you were able to do something so cool as to like chop up the bot. You were just, I don't know, the fact that it let you do such interesting things. I don't know. I love a good sandbox like that.
Yeah. Is it fair if we lock Pentiment and then I pick my 2 favorites?
Yeah.
Since the other 3 are kind of mine, so to speak.
That's very generous of you, but I do think the Monastery has such a cool moment you haven't seen yet, and I don't want to spoil it for you. Are you done with that game?
No, and I am not going to play it, so you can spoil that if you want.
So, okay. The reason the Monastery gets this like extra bump for me is because the townspeople completely light it on fire. Then you go back through this and it's been completely destroyed. Someone is still living there. That has been, you don't know that they're alive still. And there's this person who is like living within the monastery who is painting all over it and changing the art throughout the entire monastery and doing some really, really crazy stuff. And this leads into like people that have died previously are being put on these mosaics as well. And it is a crazy space that it has 2 completely different zones built into one. And it's incredibly beautiful in the beginning, but it takes such a stark change after this place has been lit on fire. That I ended up loving being in the monastery every opportunity I got to. And you end up having these like underground areas that you end up working your way to and realizing that the monastery is the entire town in crazy ways.
I'm happy to lock it at this point. Okay, I'm happy to lock it. And then this is very difficult for me, but I think I actually would. I really want to rise up the level design from Serial Cleaners and Sniper Elite. So I think I'm happy to drop Grounded, as difficult as that decision is, because Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes down to it, like for both these games, there are several levels that I loved, and there is so much love and care in them, and these are the highlights of the game. Whereas for me, I love the sandbox if we're talking about individual level, but I just love literally every single thing in Grounded. Every single area is
Yeah.
interesting for me. So I don't know. The sandbox is just like one of
Many
I don't know. It's like
yeah.
there's a consistency to it where these are like the peak moments of these games, I guess. So
I will also say, if it makes you feel any better, I would have chosen the monastery over any of the Grounded levels.
Yeah.
I love those levels in Grounded. I thought they were super cool, but
two Obsidian teams battling it out, different teams
Yeah,
of what,
right.
like 15, 20 people within Obsidian.
Yeah. Shout out to them though. Seriously, like I can't wait for Outer Worlds 2 now.
I've never thought of them as like super strong level designers, but look at it, like they clearly are. So it's good stuff.
Also Avowed, man, when Avowed comes out, that is just quick shout out. Pillars of Eternity is amazing, and anybody out there who has any CRPG love, go play Pillars of Eternity. It's incredible.
I want to talk to you about that later. I'm gonna say that as a hint for the listeners. I'm just gonna say I want to talk to you about Pillars of Eternity later, Dante. So I'll just say that for now. Here's our list: 1,000-Pound Butterfly from Neon White, Capital City of Landau, Elden Ring, The Monastery from Pentiment, Spy Academy from Sniper Elite 5, and Rikers from Serial Cleaners. Great games. Honestly, our top 10, 15 this year was incredibly strong. This was harder to cut down to a top 5 than it has been before. So with that, that's going to be the end of this episode. I forgot to mention this earlier, so sorry to this, but I mentioned in our first episode had Taylor's Game of the Year. In this episode, Travis or Kirkland did that. They haven't recorded yet, which is why I forgot. So I don't know whose is going to be in the episode, and I don't know where it's going to be. But at some point, you heard from them, so thank you to them. That was it for the best levels of 2022, and we'll be back in just a couple of days to do the best characters, and then we're almost closing it out here for the Game of the Year. So thank you, everyone, for listening. We will be back again shortly. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.